Amendment. Even the Archbishop didn't come out and support this. Even Bob Schaefer, who was running for Senate, didn't support it. There's probably a reason why that is. Instead, Ken Buck goes on the record, and then that allows those commercials to say Ken Buck opposes common forms of birth control. And when people hear that over and over and over again, it creates this mosaic, as Adam was saying, that he's too extreme, that he's a crazy guy and he can't be elected. Those final ads were devastating, I think, the very end there, because it just sort of tied it all up and says, I can't vote for that.
Right.
Can't vote for this
Talk to
guy.
me a little bit about the Tea Party movement. As a Tea Partier myself, as a guy who's been in enough of these rallies, I looked at this, and my frustration over the years have been Republicans who have been weak-kneed, the Olympia Snowe kind of Republicans that have always caused us problems. And the Tea Party movement I see as a way to strengthen up, make Republicans act like Republicans. Instead, in these 3 United States Senate candidates, we had losses when we should have had wins, and you could argue the Tea Party movement made that happen.
Well, if you think about what the Tea Party stands for, at least from the folks that I've been able to talk to, it's more on the fiscal side than it is on the social side.
Agreed.
And if you look at those candidates, all 3 that you mentioned were probably undone by social positions more than they were undone by fiscal positions. And so in many ways, you know, and this started, I mean, way back in the Bush presidency, you know, the Medicare prescription drug Part D, the largest domestic program that this country had seen.
Yay, Republicans.
You know, in many ways, what came with that, though, in some of these fiscal candidates and fiscally conservative candidates were social conservatives who didn't necessarily mesh with, you know, maybe their population.
It's something that the Republicans haven't quite learned. Not everyone's a social conservative. Right now, everyone is a fiscal conservative. Take advantage of it.
And as Adam said, they were fiscal conservatives, yet you elected people who, when they got to the general election, weren't palatable to the regular general election voters.
To women. The women vote on
That's where the Senate race was lost, was unaffiliated women in the suburbs didn't want to vote for. And if you look at the undervote and you look at all the different races, where the Secretary of State race, the Treasurer's race, where people don't really know the candidates, but they know they want a Republican in 2010, they had more votes than Ken Buck.
I think about the most beatable candidate in any United States Senate race, a guy who was never elected, a guy who has no real personality, who's not known to anyone, and who comes across as very milquetoast. He comes across as he is, an Ivy League overeducated elitist. And this is red meat. How did we screw this up? Well, let me explain it. Let's move on to the governor's race. That was the fun one. That was Caldara's political axiom #1 in full force. First of all, do you think Ritter regrets not running?
No, not at all. If you've seen him at all recently, he's just much happier. I mean, you know, he's in many ways.
Life is not about being happy. It's about winning. What kind of crap Republican would you be?
Well, I'm an unaffiliated Arapahoe County heterosexual voter, as you pointed out already in this program. Yeah, he's just much happier. And I don't know any other way to put it. If you see him now, I mean, anyone who covered him day to day those first few years, he just wasn't. I mean, you know, not that you have to enjoy being governor in many ways, but for those of us who've covered Bill Owens, loved it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, certain people live for this. They love it. Governor Ritter did not, and you could see it in his face, and he's a much happier individual right now. So I think from a...
Could he have won?
Against who? Because I think the dynamics change.
Well, against any Republican, he would have lost. In this year, he could have won, I think.
Yeah, I think he could have beaten Tom Tancredo.
Yeah. Again, Republicans don't, I want to say, vet their candidates. You know, McGinnis, you know, was anybody surprised when the scandal came? It was pretty much an idea of, we knew a scandal was going to come. Which one is it? We didn't expect plagiarism, but why not?
Right. When we wrote an editorial after the plagiarism scandal came out saying Scott McGinnis should drop out of the race, voters in Colorado deserve 2 credible candidates to run, and Republicans should get another chance here to elect somebody. We sort of started ticking off all the other things we already knew about Scott McGinnis that would tell you that he wasn't the best candidate to put forth in the first place. So it necessarily wasn't a surprise.
And I think you know, the Republican Party voters knew that, which is why they went for option B, which was Dan Mays. I mean, you know, it was not as if you could argue that was the protest. I mean, the protest from the Republican Party.
In regards to your book, The Blueprint, which talks about this infrastructure, this Republican primary wasn't played just by Republicans.
No.
For a first time, this was obviously played for with Democrats.
The last 2 weeks before the primary race, Democrats, the Democratic Governors Association, Pat Schrager, was actually at 527, so you could see where the money was spent. $500,000 attacking McInnes over those plagiarism issues. And it's not like the commercial was, I would argue, particularly devastating, but it ran in complete saturation across the state 17 times a day on every single television station. And he loses, John, by 5,000 votes in the primary. Right. So what? Do the math, and that's a fair investment.
There was enough of that going on.
For the first time, obviously, plainly, Democrats put money into a Republican primary to bring out the more defeatable candidate.
They tried to do it all the way down in state legislative races, too. They spent money to try and, and again, it gets back to what I was saying. They knew all along this election was going to be about defeating Republicans.
And politicians go, but the infrastructure stays, and that's what my team refuses to learn.
Right, and I think, as Adam pointed out in the book, it's created so you make gains in those good years where you're going to have Democratic sweeps, and then to hold back the forces as they're coming in bad years, and that's exactly what it did here.
Political levy. There were some holes, but the wall didn't come down.
The decision by Tancredo to come in as Superman before the primary and say, both of you guys need to get out or else I'm coming in, should he have waited 2 weeks, wait to see what happened, and then come in as Superman? Would that have made any difference at all?
No. At the end of the day, you have to ask the question of who are these people, any of them, frankly, running for? Are they running for their party? Or are they running for themselves? When that race was joined by Congressman Tancredo, regardless of the reasons why he joined that, it lost the race. There was no way. There was absolutely no way. You do the math. Despite what those polls were showing, the Hickenlooper team's polls were consistently showing him over 50%, never wavered at any time from primary to general election. That race was, for all intents and purposes, lost as soon as Tancredo got it. It may have been lost when Mays won the primary, but it was lost.
And Mays was never going to get out. The only hope was McInnes wins the primary, and you appeal to his good reason, and he gets out of the race. Mays was never going to get out. And I must point out our Denver Post polls were right on as well. 51-36, and we had Mays, I think, at 12 or 14. He ended up getting 12.
We were with you on those polls.
I'm just saying that it was, as Adam said, it was lost at that point. The numbers just didn't work. There was no way. And there was always, everybody said Tom Tancredo can't win a statewide race. And here, and he can't,
In the same way that Diana DeGette could never win a statewide race. Yeah, right. Just too polarizing. I'm thinking about Dan Mays. What was it, the eve before the day you had to pull your name off to get it off the ballot officially? Was there a man in Colorado that was more employable at that point? A guy who needed a job. How many job offers were whispered into his ear? And the day after, the guy can't get hired at Home Depot. Now, this is a lesson we all ought to know about perishable capital.
I know you both have kind of, if you think about it, what did Dan Mays do wrong? In that he put himself up as a candidate, the party selected him. Right. Yeah, it's truly the American. In many ways, you could argue, John, this is not his fault. This is the fault of the 190,000 people who voted for him in the primary.
You're wrong that he won the primary. Scott McInnes lost the primary.
Either way, there was a different candidate other than Scott. It was because
it's the same system that Republicans end up picking their candidates, which is who's next in line, who do we owe some favors to, who's the one who does it. There's not an infrastructure that pops them out. What caused Josh Penry to leave? Can we be honest about it? Josh Penry would be governor right now.
I'll take his word at it that he felt. What he told us was he felt he would have had to spend a god-awful amount of money beating up on McInnes. He sincerely believed he was going to win the primary, but he thought he would have been fatally flawed as a candidate then facing this juggernaut of an infrastructure that was going to take every single thing that McInnes had said about him in the primary and put it on 18 times a day on every single television station. He wouldn't have had the time to raise the resources to fight it. The Republican donors wouldn't have come to his aid. I think exactly what he feared would have happened in many ways. And, he chose to not go into his mid-30s with an L on his record.
Kidding? I went into my 20s with an L in my life, the 30s with an L, the 40s. I'm heading to my 50s with an I am Mr. Loser.
It's okay. Baseball and couldn't hit as a 12-year-old. It's never a good sign.
It's not a good sign.
Henry was a quarterback, so he understands how the game is played.
The fight is important. Winning or losing, that's secondary.
I have no idea other than what he told us, and if I knew there was another reason, I'd put it in the Denver Post before I'd say it on your show. However, I think he would have won. I think he would be the governor or the governor-elect today had he run.
Yeah, the beautiful thing is that now it's going to be Governor Hickenlooper that gets to deal with a $1 billion shortfall, and hopefully enough Republicans if they stay together. It's a wonderful, this is going to be some interesting years ahead.
It's quite a gift. He's leaving the next mayor a $100 million shortfall, but he's inheriting one 10 times the size of that. So he ran. He wanted this. It's his now.
Let's talk a little bit about the